Welcome to Teaching Well, Finding Your Path During Challenging Times, Part 1 with Tawnya Johnston. My name is Kalpana McCann, and I am your moderator for this session. The OTF Land Acknowledgement. We acknowledge first and foremost that we are gathered in the province of Ontario on the traditional territories of various Indigenous peoples who have been present on this land known as Turtle Island since time immemorial. We acknowledge that this has been a meeting ground for generations. We are grateful to the stewards and caretakers of this land. As advocates, teachers, and educators, we understand our collective responsibility to honor, protect, and sustain this land. We further recognize and honor within the membership of OTF those who are Indigenous to this land. This practice of recognizing the ancestral and traditional lands in which we work, live, and play is a concrete action that we undertake as the first step towards reconciliation between Canadians and the Indigenous peoples of this land. But it is not our only step. Collectively and individually, we must seek to denounce the injustices and the wrongs that have been committed against the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and to dedicate ourselves to cultivating and maintaining relationships based on mutual respect and trust. Our presenter for this session is Tawnya Johnston. Tawnya is an experienced teacher and provincial presenter who feels passionate about teaching and learning. Throughout her 25 years of teaching, she has led workshops and facilitations in classroom management, behavioral intervention, team building, student engagement, and mental health. Tawnya believes in the power of connection, focusing on the importance of relationships. Please welcome Tawnya.
I'm happy to be here this evening with all of you. It is a beautiful sunny day where I'm coming from today. I'm hoping that you have a little sunshine in your corner of the province as well. All right. So teaching well. Especially as this is a two-part series, it's my hope that we'll have the opportunity to get to know each other a little during our time together this evening. So on that note, I invite you to share in your chat what area of the province you are coming from this evening. So we have somebody that just finished a wicked thunderstorm in Barrie. Thanks for sharing. Lack of sunshine there. I am coming to you from the Hamilton area. All right. Excellent. Some sunshine up in Thornhill, Scarborough, Ottawa, east of Cornwall. Wonderful. Wherever you're coming from this evening, let's add that in there. It's so great to see where you're coming from. Fantastic. Oh my gosh, I have somebody I worked with here at Central. Oh my gosh, hello there. Hi. That's amazing. That's really, really exciting. It's so fun to see people that we may know together. Fantastic. All right. So we're coming from all different areas of the province here, and we're coming together for this webinar on teaching well. So on that note, and in that vein, and to get us into kind of that headspace, I invite you to share in the chat. Look at the emojis there if you can. If you can't find one that suits, you could always just type a word or two, but think about something that makes you feel good. When you kind of want to focus on feeling better, feeling well, what is something that you kind of turn to that makes you feel good? So I'm going to add a tree here in the chat. Oh, somebody's got their cat, the gym, fantastic. So if I need to feel grounded, for me, it's definitely nature. When I get out in nature, whether I'm in the forest or I'm down walking along the lake, I definitely feel more grounded. It's kind of great to see here in the chat some things that make you feel good that maybe we could relate to and interests that we share, but also to kind of remind ourselves. I know sometimes there's something that makes me feel great. I saw dancing in the chat. I'm a dancer and a dance teacher. Dancing in my living room is one of those things that really kind of brings me up and makes me feel great. And I fell out of the habit of it for a little bit. And then I heard something recently about, kind of just dancing your stress out. And so that's something I've gone back to that's made me feel great. So wonderful. All right, so a little bit about me and my experiences. As Kalpana mentioned, I started teaching 25 years ago. I started teaching in Toronto for the Toronto District School Board. And then I spent the next about 10 years in the Niagara area, the District School Board of Niagara. And then since then, I've been teaching in the Hamilton region and the Hamilton area. I've taught students in some capacity from kindergarten to grade 8. And the focus of my homeroom experiences has been with junior and intermediate students. And currently I'm teaching grade 7. So I've had the privilege of working with teachers across our beautiful province. A lot of the focus of that work has been in classroom management and student engagement. I've been as far north as Long Lac, a lovely little community about 3 hours north of Thunder Bay, as far south as the Niagara region, as far east as Ottawa, and as far west as Wallaceburg. I've really enjoyed sharing the benefit of some of the lessons that I've learned from really incredible teachers and mentors, and passing some of that along. And it's also a privilege to work with other educators because I'm always learning as well. And I think that it's really important for us to remember, especially during challenging times, that there's so much that we're already doing well, and that sometimes we just need like a small adjustment or a small change, and that can make a really, really big difference. So my current focus for training is teacher well-being. And I wanted to share a little bit with you about my path for challenging times and why I was inspired to do this webinar. So post-pandemic, I found that student need and behavior was overwhelming at times. And that, of course, there was an academic gap with most students. But the thing I saw as the most challenging was the socialization gap with students. So my grade 7s were coming in as typical grade 7s in terms of hormones and growing and being in sort of bigger bodies, but they didn't have the benefit of socialization with their peers for the last 2 years. And that presented, a lot of different challenges. I saw them struggling with their mental health. And I felt that it was something that I really kind of need to reflect and look on. At first, I really grounded myself sort of in good teaching practices, the foundations of teaching. I kind of went back to the basics and thought, okay, I've got to reset here. There was a lot of learning that needed to be relearned or reestablished. So things like establishing procedures with students, connecting and developing that rapport with them that really sort of feels good, stating clear expectations. So my focus at first was on teaching well, and that helped me to avoid feeling kind of overwhelmed by student need, and it reduced the number of challenging student behaviors that I was dealing with. So that was student-centered though. And then through my training as a mental health rep, for my school with other educators in the board, working with those other teachers and my staff, I realized that I also needed to focus on my own stress. So that led me to explore more teaching well from the perspective of my own mental health and well-being. So I've shared with you why I chose to participate and lead this webinar. I would love to hear from you and for you to have a chance to hear from each other why you chose to participate in this wellness webinar for teachers. So if you just want to add that to the chat, we can have a little moment to share. All right. So wellness at school being a focus, wellness in your personal life being a focus, experiencing burnout, definitely. Having students struggling with their coping skills. Yeah, so a lot of the same reasons as to why you may have wanted to join this webinar is the same reasons why I wanted to kind of do my own exploration. So I'm going on this journey with you. It's something that I'm absolutely still exploring and wanting to share with other educators and work on together. So, all right, let's dive in. So here's goals for this webinar. They're goals that I'm hoping that we can fulfill over the course of the next couple of webinars, because it's a 2-part series. Recognizing the impact of stress, and I'm speaking from the perspective of on ourselves, the impact that stress makes on ourselves, specifically understanding the dimensions of wellness. There's 8 different dimensions of wellness, And when I started to look into this and reach out for resources and support for myself, I found it was a lot less overwhelming to look at the dimensions of wellness, because it breaks wellness down into those 8 different sections. And there was lots of times where I was like, you know what, I'm doing an okay job with this. This is an area of wellness I'm feeling good about, but this area is lacking. This area needs my attention. So it helped me to break it down into those different dimensions, and it felt less overwhelming in that way. Also looking at understanding the relationship between wellness and self-efficacy. That's something that we're going to be sort of doing in a fluid way during this session, but we'll spend a lot more time on it in our second session. And in terms of self-efficacy, I'm looking at that sort of confidence that we have in ourselves and sort of feeling good about our abilities to teach. That's definitely something that was shaken a bit for me post-pandemic. I was having to teach, of course, online. Then when we returned to the classroom, we were in rows, and I wasn't able to teach in a way that sort of felt organic and felt good for me. So having to sort of come back to some of those ways of teaching that worked for me in the past and kind of focus on that helped sort of build my confidence again. So as I talked about, sort of those foundational teaching strategies. So looking at sort of what works for you, right? We can share with each other and then ultimately, decide what works best for us. And then lastly, implementing tools, strategies, and ideas to help us with wellness and teaching well from those 2 different perspectives. And in terms of that, that's going to be kind of woven through our time together. So kind of think about how these goals might align with, your needs as we spend our time together. All right, so we're going to start with recognizing the impact of stress. And I'm just going to switch over to a video to share with you right now. So this video is called Stress Bucket. And I felt it explained well the impacts of stress.
Stress is usually seen as something we need to avoid. This is not true. We need stress, and we need our body's stress hormone cortisol to rise and fall throughout the day. Stress helps us wake up in the morning, helps us focus, learn, and remember new things. It's when people experience too much stress and start having difficulties coping that stress becomes a problem. High levels of stress can disrupt the natural changes in the body's stress response system and start to affect our physical and mental health. Over time, accumulated stress can result in false FFF response activations. When trying to measure our stress tolerance, the bucket analogy can be helpful. Our stress tolerance, or the size of our bucket, is a product of our genes, personality, and life experiences, and its size varies from person to person. The water in this analogy is the combination of all the stress in your life. We use the coping strategies we have available to keep our bucket from overflowing. They are like taps that allow water to drain from the bucket. Stress can include training, work, school, relationships, finances, moving, changing jobs, or the loss of a loved one. Both positive and negative experiences will affect the water level. A big bucket can hold more water or stress before it overflows. With a smaller bucket, less water is required for the water or stress level to become critical. While you can't change the size of your bucket, you can make life adjustments to reduce water coming in. You can also learn new coping strategies and stress management techniques to allow water to drain out. Mind tools, exercise, quality sleep, relaxation, and sharing your feelings with friends are some examples of effective water taps. Staying up late, sleeping in, drugs, inactivity, procrastination, suppressing or ignoring problems are examples of unhelpful coping strategies or false taps. They might give temporary relief, but actually result in water flowing back into your bucket. This video was created by Brave, Building Healthy Minds.
All right, so I'd like you to just think about some of the messaging shared in the video, and to think to yourself for a moment about something that sort of maybe challenged your thinking. So think for a moment about the video and something that you saw about stress that perhaps challenged your thinking. All right, I invite you to, if you feel like it, sharing in the chats if there's something, sort of a certain section or something that resonated with you. I know for me, definitely looking at those different sort of taps and that idea of sort of being too full up. And depending on what you're experiencing in your personal life, you know, your bucket might be coming from a place of already sort of like, you know, already full in terms of stress, half full in terms of stress. So when other things kind of get added in, you know, you can sort of reach the top of your sort of, you know, capacity for stress a little bit quicker. Yeah, the size of our buckets is different. And that was sort of enlightening for me, and to sort of remember that depending on what I'm experiencing or colleagues may be experiencing, you know, we often think of this from our students' perspective. Depending on what we're experiencing as human beings and individuals, you know, we're going to come to it from a different place of how much water is sort of already in that bucket, that stress bucket. Wonderful. Yeah, interesting to see the false water taps. Definitely, I've definitely caught myself since the pandemic turning to things that sort of feel good in the moment. You know, maybe I'm binge watching Netflix and I'm really enjoying a show and it's making me laugh and it's making me feel good and I enjoy it. But then sometimes, you know, continuing to use that as a strategy to a point where maybe I'm ignoring other things that would be perhaps better for my physical and mental health, and recognizing that, you know, you have to kind of look at those false stressors sometimes. You know, something can be good to a point, but then it can become too much. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Fantastic. All right. So we're going to move along to looking at understanding those dimensions of wellness that I mentioned earlier. So this is an eye and image activity. This is one of my favorites. I didn't create it. I was introduced to it in training myself. And the idea is that you're choosing a selection of images that, you know, your student or that another teacher, fellow educator can kind of see themselves within. So the lens I'd like you to look through for this is the lens of wellness. So for you, wellness is, and then just think to yourself for a moment, which of those images is wellness for you right now. There may be several, but kind of choose one for now that you sort of connect to, one that resonates with us, with you at this time. As you're thinking, I would love to hear some of your voices. So think to yourself for a moment. And if you are comfortable sharing, you can begin to click on that raise your hand button, because it would be really nice to hear from some of you so that you're not just hearing my voice if you're comfortable sharing. Which image you chose?
Tawnya, we have Allison who's raised her hand. Allison, you may unmute yourself.
I'd say the bottom left resonates the most with me because it has a combination of different calming meditative practices, and there's an element of being outside. I haven't gotten to go on a beach vacation in a really long time, and I really desperately miss sand.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Paula, you may unmute yourself.
For me, it was the nature. I just find resetting myself in nature and just having that quiet after the busyness of the classroom on some days, it can be really helpful.
Thank you.
And Tawnya, we've got a couple of things in the chat as well. Someone said, you know, going on nature walks, reading the forest when I'm having trouble sleeping. I picture myself walking through the forest, seeing the sunshine through the trees and hearing animals.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Kalpana. When I was building this slide and thinking of a variety of different ways that people might consider wellness. Again, I mentioned before, sometimes we just need to be reminded of something that sort of feels good or tap back into something that works for us. So building this slide, a couple of them I made sure were centered around sort of, that social connection in the upper left corner there, that idea of time with friends or partners or loved ones. And at the bottom there, time sharing meals around the table. There's definitely been times where when I've been feeling low or more burnt out, I haven't wanted to have that social time as much. But then when, a girlfriend invites me out for a coffee or somebody has an event, I've been kind of pushing myself to go. And then once I sort of get there and I'm with everyone and, the laughter starts or, the meals being shared or just even those calm moments together, I sort of remember that it's really important to make time for that in my life. So on that note, have a look and see which one might resonate with you that you might want to spend more time focusing on for yourself. And again, if you're comfortable, you can raise your hand or you can share in the chat which one of these ideas of wellness might be something that would be really great for you to sort of, either tap back into or begin to explore for yourself.
Allison has her raised hand. Allison, go ahead.
I'd say the forest image, so the third from the left on the top. I used to spend a lot of time in nature, and I'm doing an online Master's of Education right now, and so I find that I'm inside a lot. I also lost my dog a couple of years ago, and he was like my number one reason to go to the forest because he loved running around. So I found it a little bit difficult to really get back to that, but I want to make some more time for it because I, like many other people have noted, feel a lot better in nature. I just have been avoiding it.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Allison. I think that when we hear from each other, that sometimes somebody else is experiencing something similar, I think it helps us to feel kind of more connected to one another and those shared experiences. So thank you.
We have many people in the chat who've talked about being outdoors and how it just makes them feel better. Someone says they need to take up yoga again because it's a good strategy because it teaches you to breathe consciously. And when I'm stressed, I really, I literally find that I'm holding my breath. So
it's so true. Thank you, Kalpana. Yoga is one of those things that I came to. I was a dancer growing up, and I came to yoga later on in life as an adult. And it's one of those things that I just can't believe the difference that I feel after I've done even 5 minutes of yoga stretching on my own. It can be really, really powerful. All right. Okay, so here are those dimensions of wellness that I mentioned. The 8 dimensions of wellness. I'm just going to let you have a look there at that image. And I've listed them on the right-hand column there as well in case they're a little bit hard to read. But I wanted to include the image because I know sometimes a visual helps us with connecting. So we're going to spend some time looking at these images, these dimensions, and diving into them. And as we're looking at them, I want you to be looking at it through the lens of your own personal journey, your own growth, and your own needs. I'm going to be highlighting what some of my learnings and what works for me. And then we'll continue to share in the chat at different points. I'll invite you to do that because I think it is really powerful, as I mentioned at the beginning, to learn from each other and to have this time to sort of reflect. Our days are busy. We don't always have a time to stop and reflect on ourselves. And it's my hope that by the end of today's session, you'll have had a chance to look at these dimensions and think about the ones that, you know, you're feeling pretty good about. I'm feeling okay about that one. Because sometimes when we engage in professional development, we can kind of be hard on ourselves and think, you know, I'm doing nothing right. And that's just not true. There's lots that we're doing well as educators already every single day. And so looking at the ones that we're doing okay with, we're doing well with, we're feeling good about, I think is really important. And then also identifying those areas where we know that we need to either have some growth or that reconnection that some of us have mentioned this evening already, where we know that's something that makes us feel good and it's something that we want to connect back to. So I've broken them down into a couple per slide here so that they're easier to see and to kind of focus on one at a time. So the first one we're going to take a look at is emotional. This is one where I've had, I'd say, the biggest focus and the biggest growth over the last maybe 5 years or so. I have started a morning ritual, I call it. I don't like the word routine. I don't know, routine feels like work somehow for me, but I've started a morning ritual for myself. As a teenager, I was the one to stay up late. I was the one to sleep in. I was the one to get up barely in enough time to kind of rush out the door and get to where I needed to be. So I've pushed myself to develop and grow from there. And I now wake up with enough time for some time for myself in the morning. And it's been life-changing. And I start off with some meditation and some journaling. And I find it such a powerful, powerful way to start my day. Different people might want to start their days in different ways, but the idea of waking up with, even if it's like 10 minutes for you to do some yoga stretching or 10 minutes for you to go for a walk outside, whatever it might be for you personally, kind of start to think about if you, and maybe you already do this and you have a wonderful habit, but if you were to continue with sort of a morning ritual for yourself, or if you were to build that time in for yourself in the morning, what is it that would have a big impact for you? So for me, it's meditation and journaling. And because with the journaling, I'm setting my intentions for the day. I'm thinking about the day ahead and how I want to feel and the sort of, the energy that I want to generate and, where my focus needs to be from a really grounded place. So if you just want to reflect on that in a moment and feel free to add to the chat what would have the greatest impact for you in the morning if you were to set aside even 10 minutes for yourself. Okay, stop watching the news in the morning and reading instead. Wonderful. I've talked to several people that have made that choice for themselves, and they found it to be really positive because sort of what's going on in the world, and the news does tend to be from a negative perspective often. That's not sort of coming at them in the day, but instead they're sort of generating the feelings that they want to start with their day with. Nice journaling, meditation. Yeah, that morning coffee. I'm a tea drinker myself, but I love the smell of coffee in the morning. So if my husband's brewing a coffee, I love that smell. I love my tea. Just sort of that quiet time. Time to exercise. Yeah, what a great recommendation. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. Putting do not disturb times on your phone at night before you go to bed. And then in the morning so that time is kind of for yourself. Our devices can be such a distraction, and before you know it, we can kind of scroll away 15 minutes that we maybe would have wanted to spend another way. Calling your mom on the way to work. Yeah, slowing down, not rushing. On that note of slowing down and not rushing, Paula put that into the chat here. Thanks, Paula. I remember learning about cortisol for the first time, and the analogy of being chased by a saber-toothed tiger and the cortisol that's released into your system when that happens, and that it takes 20 minutes for that to clear and us to calm down once that cortisol has been released. And when I first learned about it, the analogy that was given is that our body doesn't know the difference between rushing because we're running late and kind of fleeing from a saber-toothed tiger. And I thought, wow, I was a person who, like I said, kind of cut myself down to the wire with my time, especially as a teenager and a young adult. So it made a big difference for me to slow down and not rush and not have that kind of cortisol release first thing. Lovely. Prayer, devotions, yoga, fantastic. So lots of you already have a wonderful routine in place, and that's fantastic. You learned it sooner than I did. And then for some, like me, maybe wanting to develop that or revisit it. Thank you for sharing. I think it's powerful to remember what works for us, or to sometimes try something new. For me, this was a new learning entirely, to set aside that time for myself. The Calm app is an app that I absolutely love. There's lots of great meditation apps out there. It's just the one I happen to have used because I know for a while there was a discount for educators. There is a free version where you have less access to some of it, but it's something that I find very worthwhile because it has many meditations on it, but it also has music that I'll listen to in the background when I'm working. It has movement, sort of segments, a daily move, and I found that to be really powerful. The reason why I started doing my sort of morning time for myself, my morning ritual, was after listening to one of Jay Shetty's podcasts. His podcasts, if you haven't listened to them yet, I got into them during COVID, are called On Purpose, on a variety of topics. And his one talking about starting off your day really was powerful for me. The journal that I use in the morning, I use High Performance Planner by Brendan Burchard. The reason why I liked his planner, I've tried a bunch of different ones, is that it focuses on high performance habits. And he talks about them being habits that kind of help us to gain insight on ourselves. And so looking at those habits and reflecting on them daily is something that I have been able to gain a lot of insight on, the areas and the habits that I already are really strong in, and then the ones that I need to improve on more. All right. So I spent a lot of time on emotional because it is something that I found I needed to work on, but also in talking with my fellow colleagues in the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, when I'm at my mental health rep meetings, or among my own staff and colleagues, that's something that we found we needed to focus on. So I've honored that with a little bit more time here this evening. All right, environmental. So sometimes there's things about our environment we don't have control over. So any of these dimensions of wellness, we're definitely looking at like a circle of influence and a circle of control. So what is something we can influence, or what is something we can control? If it's outside of our control, then we're not wanting to kind of put our focus somewhere that isn't going to have a benefit to us. I love this saying, where your focus goes, your energy flows. And so looking at things that, we can have an impact on. So in terms of the environment, the area that I definitely feel I have an impact on is how organized my classroom is and how it's set up. And then that's also an area where I'm tapping into that sort of student connection as well, and teaching well, where giving students responsibilities, asking their opinions, saying to them, guys, I'm not sure how we can kind of, put this up. What do we think, folks? And getting their input on how we're going to, put up their artwork, or how can we design the room for this lesson, or I'm setting something up for art. Does anybody, want to help out? And I find that giving responsibilities or asking the kids to contribute has been really positive. So that's a way that that feels good for me, and thinking about my environment at work. All right, so the next two dimensions are intellectual and physical. So somebody mentioned in the chat earlier, slowing down. I think that that's a really great messaging, especially for the intellectual. Having that learning and applying our knowledge, and the function of that is feeding our creativity and inspiration. And I think it's so important to slow down as teachers, and to remember breadth, not depth. That we don't have to cover the curriculum. It's not like a checklist where we have to meet every single expectation with a checkbox, but that it is something that can be threaded. And when I slow down and remember to sort of teach deep and really enjoy what I'm teaching, that's when my creativity comes out, and I really enjoy lesson planning and lesson delivery. So it's when I feel I'm a more effective teacher for the sake of my students, but it's also when I feel I'm teaching well in the sake of my own creativity, my own enjoyment. All right, so physical. So looking at the sort of physical operation of our bodies, right? So those conventional aspects of healthy living, whether it's what we're eating and eating for energy, whether it's the amount of sleep that we get, our physical activity, kind of focusing on this. There is a really fantastic book I'm in the middle of reading. It's called Burnout. The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. So I'm in the middle of reading that book. It is aimed at women in terms of burnout. I think anyone that was socialized male, that men could still get benefit from it. But in that book, it talks about the importance of recognizing and dealing with your stress. So it talks about how the stressor is important. What is the stressor? What is the thing stressing us out? You know, identifying the stressor and dealing with the stressor. But once we've done that, we still have to deal with the stress, because the stress we're holding in our bodies. And so it talks about the fact that we have to release that stress, and that is physical. It's only done through physical. So whether it's exercise of any kind, whether it's going for a walk or yoga or playing sports or weightlifting, that's the quickest way to kind of relieve it. But that there's other ways we can release it through the physical, and that can be through laughter. It can be through you know, different sort of breathing techniques. It can even be through like tense your muscles for 10 seconds and release. But that physical nature of releasing our stress is really, really important. All right, so we're looking next at social and spiritual. So in terms of social, that kind of social community building that can happen both at work, of course, and in our personal lives. So let's have some fun with this one. Let's have a look at socially, whether it's at work or on your own time. What are some things that you enjoy doing with others? And let's add some of those into the chat here. What are ways that you enjoy socializing? Oh, thank you, Kalpana. Kalpana has put in the reference to Jay Shetty and to the Burnout book, if you want to have a look at that in the chat as well. Oh, live music events. Yes, I was so excited when concerts were a thing that we could attend again. And it just feels so good being a part of an event like that. Coffee with friends. Board games with family. Wonderful. Euchre Club, Mervish Theater. Oh, fantastic. All of the above. Girls' Weekend Getaway. Yes. Wonderful. Aquafit, yeah. Sometimes joining a class or a club is nice because it's something that, you know, we're doing weekly, and it takes like a conscious, you know, decision to be like, I'm not going to go, when it's something you've already sort of paid for or something that you're committed to. So that can be really great in terms of socialization. Yeah. Yeah, different ways that we can get out and be social with one another. With board games, speaking of board games, I love playing those with my family and friends as well. It's something that I've introduced with my students. Not that I didn't have some board games in the classroom before, but I've specifically set aside some time with them because of the fact that they need so much help with their socialization, where, you know, there is certain times where we're playing board games, and, you know, it's a time for us to be social and to have that sort of face-to-face interaction with each other. I join in. It's a really great way to do that bonding and connecting with some students that are maybe a little bit tougher to reach or have, you know, more walls up. Playing a game with them and kind of that laughter and that friendly competition and banter has been a really great way to connect with some of my students. And I'm finding that it's a really great way for them to connect with each other too, and kind of, you know, have that time together that's really kind of healthy and practice that socialization. So something that I've been enjoying doing with my students and that they ask for. So it's a really great kind of motivator as well, that if they want to, you know, sort of play board games and there's sort of, you know, a task that we're getting through and maybe they're finding it heavy or challenging, then it's a really great motivator to say, you know what, let's power through this. I know we can do this. Or, you know, if we have more participation, we can kind of work through this in a way that feels better, and I'll really know that, you know, you're understanding, you're learning, and then we can have some time for board games. So great to use those in the classroom as well. Spiritual. So I had mentioned before that idea of like where your focus goes, your energy flows. So it says here, you know, that individuals influences an individual's self of belonging, you know, and relationships. Whoops, pardon me, bumped through a couple there. And that I think it is important to think about that. What's our own purpose, right? And in life, in our profession, in our practice. What is our value system? What feels good for us? And how might we sort of feed that, right? Kind of feed our soul in a way that feels good. So I already mentioned nature, that sort of feeds my soul. Dance also feeds my soul. And dancing with the students, because I'm a dancer, that's something I'm really comfortable with. And I lead a dance team. And I remember most recently we were doing practices for our International Day of Pink Assembly, which is tomorrow, and working on that with the intermediate students, the joy that I feel, you know, with them dancing and sharing that with them. That's something that's kind of spiritual for me. And it's really neat to see them kind of express themselves and feel good about, you know, either something they already love doing or something that maybe they've sort of challenged themselves to do. All right, so occupational and financial. So these are the last two dimensions of wellness that we're going to look at this evening. And looking at these, in terms of occupational, so I had mentioned the emotional one being something that I had really focused on most recently, both largely at work, but also just in my personal life too, that time for myself and sort of recognizing my emotions and you know, not just self-care, but self-regulation, you know, noticing when I needed to kind of regulate myself, you know, checking in with myself. And I feel like that's a crossover hugely with the occupational dimension here, right? That ability to contribute our skills and to feel like we're doing meaningful work, and to have that self-efficacy that we're going to explore more next session as well, to perform our job responsibilities effectively and contribute to our community. So I think this is an area where I've definitely kind of tapped into, and that's where some of this reflection for teaching well, this webinar has come from. So I talked about tapping into those foundational practices, you know, greeting the students at the door, revisiting expectations, remember to building some choice and some freedom into my lesson planning, remembering fun, right? Sometimes when I feel overwhelmed or stressed, my sense of humor is the first thing to go. So when that's happening, kind of stopping myself and checking in and thinking, okay, do I need to switch up maybe what I had planned for the next lesson or for this task, or do I need to give myself and my students, you know, at the end of this block of time where we've sort of been grinding, you know, the gift of playing board games together, you know, for 15 minutes at the end of, you know, a double period. And then also remembering to build student accountability into lesson planning. That's something that I've come back to, that I kind of got away from a little bit post-pandemic, where, you know, they're doing a quick exit slip as they're watching, you know, this is going to be your ticket out the door. They're filling that in as they're watching a video, or, you know, they've got a post-it note and, you know, asking them to have look fors and add that to the post-it note. And when you're ready, add it to the chart paper. So just some of those foundational teaching practices has helped me feel better about the occupational dimension. And then lastly, financially, of course, that concerns about finances can affect our interactions, even in the work environment, and of course, especially in our personal lives. I have begun using a budgeting app. It's called You Need a Budget, YNAB for short, YNAB. And with that app, it's not just that you're budgeting through it, and I'm sure there's other great budgeting apps out there as well. It's just one that I found. It's not just that you're budgeting, they actually teach you some foundational strategies for looking at your finances, and I found it really enlightening. It's also a lot of fun, believe it or not. We don't often think of like budgeting as fun, but I feel like YNAB does a really great job of making it fun. And with some of the emails they sent, one of the things that they mentioned was, you know, queuing the YNAB playlist. And I thought, there's no way they've made a playlist related to finances. And sure enough, they had, and they had done parodies of different like popular pop songs with some of their teaching. So that's a little fun suggestion if you're looking for something like that. That one does have an annual fee, but you can try it for a month for free. So if that's an area of concern that you want to look at, that's something that I've been having some fun with lately. All right, so I'm wanting to give you a bit of time now to stop and look at these 8 dimensions. So here they are again, reviewed: emotional, environmental, intellectual, physical, social, spiritual, occupational, and financial, with some of the suggestions I made off to the side there. And I would love you now to consider which dimension, if improved, would have the most impact for you right now? It can be personal, it can be professional, or it can be both. Which dimension, if improved, would have the most impact for you? And if you could just put the name of that dimension into the chat, if you're comfortable doing so, that would be fantastic. All right, a lot of people have physical, some financial, occupational, lots of emotional and physical, occupational. Thank you for sharing. That's fantastic. So it's kind of neat to see. I mean, you may have one that's different than anyone else has mentioned, and that's great because that's what works for you. And I think that's why it's so important for us to learn together, because sometimes we can see, hey, other people are working on something similar, and then sometimes we can see and go, you know what, I'm feeling okay about that one. This is the one that needs my focus right now. So think about, next, I'd love you to think about a tool, a strategy, an idea. It can be something that you learned during this evening's webinar, or it can simply be something that you were reminded of. And you know that's something that perhaps you've always wanted to do, or it's something that you've already done and that maybe you've just fallen out of practice with. So you've got the dimension in your mind, you're thinking about that dimension. And now you're thinking what strategy, what tool, what idea might you pair with that in order for you to improve that dimension in your life. Okay, so what's one thing you can do? If you're comfortable, you may share that in the chat. If you'd rather just reflect on your own, that's great. I also invite you, if you've if able, to jot down a quick note for yourself as to which one you chose and what you might want to do to help yourself in that area. So think about which one did you choose and how might you help yourself in that area. Fantastic. Thank you, those of you that are sharing in the chat. It's great to see some of your thoughts. Okay, so hopefully you've had a chance to think about what one you want to focus on. Choose one. Choose at least, it can just be one strategy. As I said at the beginning, it can be a small thing, can make a huge difference. And I would love for you to think on that and keep that in your mind, because this is a two-part series. And I love doing a two-part series because it gives us a chance to sort of reflect and grow together. Next session, we're going to look more at understanding the relationship between wellness and self-efficacy. But to end this session, in my portion of it with you this evening, is I want you to reflect on your path in teaching right now, teaching well, and commit to that dimension that you chose and the strategy that you chose for yourself. And you have 3 weeks between this session and next section where you can put that one into practice. You know, what difference could it make for you in your life in the next 3 weeks if that's something that you did for yourself, if that was a little gift that you explored between now and then. And and kind of commit to that and decide that, you know, you're going to place that importance on yourself and your own well-being. And I appreciate your participation this evening. And next session, I really look forward to hearing, you know, how that went for you. Sometimes something goes really well and we learn from it, and sometimes we struggle with something and we learn from it. And I think it would be great for you to have that chance to do that self-reflection, but also, you know, that opportunity to share with one another. We do have some time here just at the end of this session. We have wrapped things up in enough time that if anybody has any sort of last minute questions, they can ask them. Or if you do want to add in anything that you yourself just kind of want to remind yourself of, please feel free. Oh, it's great seeing in the chat some of the things that you guys are already committed to for yourself. That's fantastic. Some great ideas for me as well to look at, some of the things that I may want to work on myself. Yeah, fantastic. I really appreciate your willingness to share this evening. It's so much easier to share when people are participating. And I know that, you've been at work all day and then you're taking the time to join us here in the evening. And it's just been so fantastic sharing with you. So thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tawnya. I've got a couple of slides just to close out our session. Several people have asked when the next session is, and it is on April 30th. So please register for that as well when you have a moment. Wonderful. So thank you so much for joining us for this OTF Connects webinar. In the coming days, you'll see, you will receive a follow-up email, a link to the evaluation. I've placed that into the chat as well. And when you exit out of Zoom tonight, that will pop up as well for you to complete the evaluation. You'll receive other resources from OTF, and that will include the PDF as well. And we'll send you an archive linked to this session so that if you want to share it with your colleagues or with your family, then you can do so as well. Our next session is April the 25th, 2024 at 4:30 p.m. And it's using mirrors and windows to create an African-centered science pedagogy with Tigges M. DeMichael. So we hope you can join us for that at that session as well. And Tanya's next session is on April 30th and registration is still open. Again, thank you on behalf of OTF for joining us this evening. Have a wonderful day and we'll see you soon. Take good care.